Okay, so now what we're doing is we're going to start the sculpture of Mia. So Mia, fortunately, we have photos of her. Okay, we've got reference photos and everything's been laid out. We've got some above and below shots. Okay, but also I happen to have a sculpture of her already made from some years ago. So I just want to use her as an example in case you want to use a sample sculpture as a way of studying. That way you don't have to have a live model. So here I'm going to match this with this, okay? Now you see that this is a little bit too tall, so I'm gonna have to turn this armature to the side and just check to see that that this gesture is hers really, okay? So I'm gonna pull this back because you see how her rib cage angles backwards, right? And then I'm going to push her forward, her neck forward, okay? So you can see that I'm using a different kind of armature here. This has plumber's pipe, and this is wire area. This wire part is a little bit loose, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to do the best I can from the side view, and then I'll probably have to tweak it from the front. Okay, so now we're just going to pull this back. Now the thing about having this armature down like that is that it has the danger of maybe popping out too much. So I'm going to shift it just a touch more so that it really works. And now here, this is where you want to use a plumb line. So with the plumb line, you're going to be checking to see, once again, where the neck is lined up with that standing leg, okay? And so I'm seeing that if I go back more to where the C7, the 7th cervical vertebrae is, that it's lining up with this this ankle area, okay? All right, so I'm gonna have this aligned here. I'm gonna turn it a bit so I can see it. Okay. All right, and then I'm gonna make sure that this leg is really back more. Okay, so I know that the big issue with people is getting their gesture correct. This is really an important time. Seems like it's you know, just kind of random and, you know, very simple, but really this is where you start to really see what the gesture of the model is. Now the thing about this one sculpture is that it actually was completed. So so this thickness of the entire body is still a little bit off. So I'll be working with that as well. And I just want to tilt this back. All right. There. Hopefully that should help. All right. So so I'm getting this kind of attitude that Mia has. Okay. And I'm going to check from the back as well. Okay, now just remember that the pelvic box is going to be lined up. All right, so you can see right now, this armature just looks like a generic stick person. So I'm going to angle this leg in. I'm going to angle this knee out. Okay, and then take one more look. Okay, so this part of the hip, right, is obviously not going to be all the way out here, all right? It's going to be more here. So as long as the armature is inside of your model, it's fine, okay? So here we go. I'm going to bend this. Okay, we're just doing an approximation for now. It's just going to take a second to really get this. Okay. All right, I think this knee is actually way too high. So I'm going to let that come down a little bit more and then bend it down lower. So what you're going to notice is that this aluminum wire has a tendency to get a little bit stiff, especially if you bend it, bend it, bend it. So try to observe more where things are so that you don't have to bend it a million times. And then if you have to, you can mark the wire with a black Sharpie, and then that way you can figure out exactly where to put your bends in. Okay. Still high. Okay, so you see that I keep checking, right? That's really where all the skill is, the supposed skill. It's really patience and persistence. Can you keep looking at the same thing and still have the patience to understand it? Okay, and in this case, it's a person. Can you study this person again and again and again to the point where you really understand how this person is made? Okay. All right, so another thing too is that if you can see here, right, Mia, her C7, okay, so this is the C7, is actually to the side, okay, which means she's got so much weight and it's actually in the middle of her foot. So she's putting an enormous amount of weight on this. That's what it means. It means that she's taken the whole mass of her rib cage and she's absolutely shifted it to this side of her body, okay? So we're gonna be sure that that's happening. Right now, do you see how it's the opposite? Okay, so I'm going to shift her rib cage, excuse me, this right here, this area, to our right. Okay, you see how it's moved this leg? So now you gotta kind of grab the whole thing and then shift it again. Okay. All right. Okay, knee is looking tall again. I'm gonna let that move down, so I'll do this. Okay. I'm gonna move this out a touch. Okay, bend it like that. All right, then hold it here. And then bend it this way. Bend the head up here, okay? So remember, it's like there's the tilt of the rib cage, the tilting of the pelvis, and then there's also the opposing tilt of the head. So you're creating a zigzag. So this way, this way, okay? And then back inwards. It's literally going like a zigzag, all right? That's how the body distributes its the weight of its masses, okay? So you're not going all straight down, it's actually all triangular. And what you'll find in nature is that the triangle is the most stable structure. So that's why you see things like bridges that are built with a large series of triangles. It's because it's the most stable. Okay, so, and it also takes on the most amount of weight too. Okay, so this here. Okay, and then I think this, like this. I'm going to move the sculpture here now so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so this is still looking a touch tall. So I'm going to pull this down and then pull this arm out again. So you saw that? I angled this down and then pulled this out. Okay. Now, this seems like it can be a touch wide. So I'm going to pull this in, then pull it out again, then angle this in. Okay. Okay. So far, I think this is all right. Now I'm going to rotate it. Man, this gesture's looking nuts. Okay, so I've got to pull all this back. So you see how the back of her neck is way back here, okay? Way back here. So I got to pull this back some more. So I'm going to let this back knee move back. So you see this movement this way, right? Then it's going to go back inwards. Okay, so once again, even in the legs, you're still seeing this kind of angled triangular type of movement. Okay. So when you're doing your bends, you have to pay attention to the exact direction that you're bending the wire. Okay, otherwise you'll have quite a bit of distortion. So when I pull back, I'm actually orienting the wire this way. I'm not going diagonal, right? I'm making sure that my movement is really in alignment that way. Okay, that way as I'm looking at this profile, I'm adjusting it according to this, right? So this was correct from when I saw it from this angle. So if I'm going to change anything from the side, it has to move along this axis, okay? All right, let's see. Okay, so it still needs to move back. There's also the issue of this arm. If it goes back, it's going to hit the armature, this pipe right here. So I got to be really sure that I get this right before I go forward. This is the only issue with this kind of pipe type of armature is that that bar can get in the way. I like it because if I'm gonna make a rubber mold, it's really sturdy. But I'm just not that convinced right now. So I'm just thinking that I should do this instead. So I'm gonna do this. Okay. Then I'm gonna do this. And that's gonna squinch everything forward, then move it back. Okay. So in a perfect world, you don't have to do these kinds of things. But when you work with the real world, which has all kinds of bumps and weird stuff, you gotta just keep finagling. All right, so I'm gonna finagle this a little bit more. Okay. Now let's see if this is gonna look a little bit better. Okay. Okay, so I've gotten the overall gesture in place. I'm not completely sure about the positions of the hands and arms, but I'm not going to really worry about that. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to establish the tipping of her pelvis, okay, which is actually quite dramatic. Like I said, our model has put a lot of her body's weight onto this one leg right here, into this foot. So so we're making sure that the pelvis is pushed more over to that side and then angled, okay? So we're going for an angle like this. All right, so now I know some of you may still not be realizing how essential it is to get just these single angles correct, okay? So it really just takes repetition, where you have a straight edge tool or even a pencil, and you literally do this, and then you pass it, you know, align it over your actual photo, okay? And then do a smooth movement to be able to get it angled in front of the sculpture. Well, if you could see it, yep, over the sculpture. So that was a little bit awkward, but you literally have to be going back and forth again and again to really be sure that you've got that. Okay, so. We're gonna see how tall this pelvic point is too. So these are my measurements for Mia. This is for a different model. This is just a piece of Omega Bond board, which I really like a lot. Oh, come to think about it, I've got to do, okay. So here we've got, we have to have a base too, so we can't forget that. I'm gonna stick this base in. Okay, so in the meantime, while you're still trying to establish where the feet actually are, it's good to have the base in, so then that way, if you need to, you can move things around. But this clay right here, this like beginning of a base, will help to stabilize this wire so it doesn't jiggle around as much. Okay, once again, this is a different type of armature, and this one in particular can get a little hairy. Okay. All right. So I want to establish exactly where the top of the head is too, right now, right away. That way it's really obvious for me and I don't have to mess around with it. Okay. Now the thing that you have to realize is that using a reference model that is still, because she's presented in photos, okay? Now, if you were to have a person who was actually alive, and typically that's the real way to study. You really want to work with a live model. This kind of study right here is kind of more of an elementary beginning, in that you don't have to deal with a moving and shifting person. The only issue is that you don't want to stick with this forever. You need to be able to move. You need to actually be able to hire a model, you know, probably with a group of other artists or students, so that you can really study that model from life and in the full 3 dimensions. This right here is just a way to begin to get familiar with what it takes to make a figure, but it's really just the beginning. Okay. Okay. So it doesn't really look like much, right? But we're just trying to get a general idea of where everything is. So I'm pushing this clay on. You can see that right now it's all very straight, okay? This rib cage of hers is tipping very much like this way, okay? So we want to be sure that we get that. So I'm going to place this here. And then just make sure that her rib cage is really going to be pushing forward, okay? Now, something more like this. Now the neck, right? So we're just blocking everything in. We're just gonna get this other, remember how I told you there's this zigzag, right, that we're looking for? So there's this zigzag forward, and then the head tilts backwards. Okay, I don't mean like back, but you know, right now she's, her head is just like sinking forward too much. So try to get the back of her head in more. That way it makes her look like her head is upright. Okay. And we'll just stick in a little gob of clay here so that you can think about where her chin is. Okay. Now her pelvis, okay, you see it's just like this generic glob here, okay? It's actually tilted this way, all right? So it's angled this way. So now we've got to give it some more form. Now, once again, in order to create this sensation that her back leg is really pushing back this way, right? We want to push her pelvis forward. Okay, so you see that in drawing, you can draw all these components, but in sculpting, oh my gosh, you've got to move everything. Okay, so be sure that your clay is nice and soft. If your clay by any chance gets too hard, I've found that it can actually become a type of impediment. I don't really know why, but I do think that when you have to struggle with the texture of clay or with the hardness of the clay, it can actually distract you. It puts more of your mind and your body into struggling with the material as opposed to putting down the material with ease. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be sure to really tip this baby. Okay, so that's just a little bit from the side. And then I want to start putting in a little bit of this so that I can start to think about where the feet are as well. So just stick a little piece of clay there too. All right. So you see how partial this is, right? That's the beauty of it all. You can't be partial. You have to keep moving the sculpture. You don't want to spend too much time on just one viewpoint. You want to keep moving it around. So right now, this pelvic box is going a little bit at a diagonal, okay? So I'm going to start filling it out some more. Okay, so if I want to pull something back, I'll put more material here. And then that will add to the tilt, okay? All right, I'm gonna even out this rib cage too, because it looks pretty whack right now. So the tendency for the rib cage, right, is to make this ginormous ball. You don't want to do that. You gotta think about how the rib cage has this spine too, right? There's a spine that's here. So you want to be sure that you're not creating a big old ball, but you're making sure that this area right here, there's a recess there. So if you feel the sides of your rib cage, you'll see that that shape is narrow up top and then wider at the bottom. So that's what we're doing. Just evening things out. Okay, so I've put in more of this rib cage and pelvis, right? But the thing that I see is that this right here is too far forward still. We want to get the sensation. So if you take a look at Mia, at our model, right, you're going to see that this part, this upper part is of her rib cage is tilted backwards so that the majority of her weight is way back here, okay? So she's really extended her leg back and she's really pulling her rib cage back. Now that's so that she can rest more on her bones, okay? If she were to tip forward, because she has you know, a larger bust, right? If she were to tip forward, it would really hurt her back, especially around here and around there. So she's pulled her torso, her rib cage backwards to be able to ease the pressure off of her lower and upper back, okay? So right now, you see this sculpture. You see how it's tipped forward, okay? This rib cage is more like that. So I'm going to hold the sculpture here. Actually, I'm going to hold it here at the leg. So this is what you do when you need to make a change, okay? Hold it here and then pull back. Okay, so I believe that is much better. I just want to double check though that this neck can actually move forward a little bit more. Okay, because once again, it's going to, rib cage is going to go back, then the neck is going to want to cantilever and go in the opposite direction, and then the head's going to move back again. So I want to be sure that this kind of movement really happens. So when I do a slice like this, it's actually so I can feel if the armature is too close to the clay and I have to bend the armature again, okay? So right now, this is all about blocking things in just enough so that I get a sensation of where everything is supposed to be placed, and at the same time keeping it loose so that if I have to move the armature, I can do that. Okay, and then once again, I'm just blocking in more of this profile to be sure that everything is really going to be in place. All right. Okay. So here, it may need to come back a touch. The thing is that something to keep in mind, right? When you're looking at a reference photo, it can be very difficult sometimes to remember that the profile that you're seeing, in this case, this one right here, is not the profile of just her rib cage. It's actually her scapula here. Okay, so that's, the scapula is right underneath here. Let me show you too on the skeleton. So, of course, on this skeleton, they've screwed it right onto the ribs, okay? But really, in the profile, this scapula would be coming out more. It would swing out more like this, okay? And that's this right here, this ridge of the scapula is what you would be seeing on the profile of Mia. So it would be extending out like that, okay? All right, so now that we come back to this, I'm remembering this rib cage is not gonna come out as much as the photo. I have to leave room for the scapula to extend out, okay? All right, so let me just move this around a little bit because I know that some of you were saying that you really want to see things not just from the side, but also from above. Okay. All right. I hope that satisfied some of you students. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay. So I actually tipped this some more. I found that from the back viewpoint of Mia's reference photo that her pelvic points are actually tilted much more like this, which gives her kind of this more jaunty kind of gesture. So now that we have this, now let's add a touch more here. So you see I have this really large wooden tool. Now literally, like I'd shown with my tool demonstration, right? How to make your own tools. You could get an old spatula or a wooden cooking utensil, and just like, you know, sand it down with really, really rough sandpaper, then go with smooth, or cut it down, whittle it down with a knife, and then do the final sanding. I would actually do that. Remember always to cut away from yourself, not towards yourself. And then in that way, you can make your own large tool. Okay, so I'm just checking out this gesture here. So I think more or less it's okay. there are times when you just are not going to know until you put enough information down. So we're gonna do this for now, just to start getting our sense of alignment. Okay. And then here I'm going to mark that this is where the height of the sternal notch is. So that's just my guesstimation. Let's see if it's actually correct. So we got to go for the overall height here. And then, oh, whoa, hello. It was actually quite off. Oh, I forgot that I had to move the shoulders down a lot. So, all right, so we'll leave that right there. Okay. All right, so the bottom of the chin is actually pretty good. Wait, hang on. You know what? I was looking at it from a perspective. It's actually got to go down way, way more. All right, let's get it down here. That's why this this ruler tool is, you know, or this measurement tool is really important. So you can see that in this case, I didn't have an extra ruler. So I used a ruler to draw out all my little notches, okay? And then use all my conversions, my converted measurements to find all these points. And then now it's just a matter of, so remember, when you're looking, you have to be sure that your eye is at the height of the measurement that you're observing. So like if I'm looking at the sternal notch here, my eye is going to be at this level to be sure that it's really working. So I have to move up to the total height, make sure that's working, then back down here. And then that's how you get an accurate perspective on your measurements. Okay. All right, now I kind of remember that her head was a touch. You know, this is going off of that sculpture. I think I'm going to have to go by eyeball. I'm just not totally convinced that those are correct proportions. All right, I'm actually going to go for this. I do think it needs to be up here. All right. Okay. All right. So let's see how the C7 is. I keep forgetting that this sculpture in particular is going off of an old sculpture, so it's not necessarily the correct proportions. So I'm always going to look at the actual model's photos. So you always have to remember that if you're going to trust something, you have to really be sure. It might not necessarily be the right thing. So yeah, so I'm going to actually, I'm looking at the sternal notch and the C7, and I'm seeing that this is actually where the sternal notch should be. So I'm not going to go by those old ones. I think they're bogus. So we're going to go back up here again. Okay. All right. Okay. Those of you, my students who already have the measurements, you don't have to futz around like this. I'm futzing around because I still don't have those measurements. I'm actually going all by eyeball. So, so you don't have to worry about these kind of issues. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start just a little bit to put in where the other points are in space. So we're going to go for these shoulders, okay, remembering that here at the clavicle, those clavicles, the collarbones, are actually reference surfaces where you have primarily just skin over bone. There is the layer of the platysma muscle, which is a very thin muscle that covers the collarbone, but it's so thin that it's negligible. Okay. And really the only time that that's gonna be evident, that platysma, is if you're doing really extreme expressions like this. See that? Okay, but we're not doing that. Mia's just chilling. Okay, so here we go. All right, so I want to show you what I did with these collarbones. You see that shape? Oop, hello. You see that shape? So it's like a Cupid's bow. Okay, so it comes out more here, and then it swings in at the very end. Okay, so and then from there, that's where the deltoid starts to attach. But we'll get to that point. So let's get this as well. Now I find that if I use a really sharp tool to do these centering kind of alignment type of drawings, okay, especially even the placement of where muscles are, right? I find that that really helps to create very precise drawing that will make my mind much more precise. So if possible, it does help to use a thinner tool. The thing though is that when you use a thicker tool, you can see it graphically much better, okay? So so it's just a matter of where you're going to be refining things. In the beginning, if you're stepping back more to be able to see the overall proportions, you probably want to use a much thicker line like this. Okay. All right. And then here also, this is part of the whole process. You're going to be drawing where these various anatomical features are. It's going to really help you to think about where things are actually arranged, okay? Because the tendency with the figure is to just make this big round mass, okay? We want to avoid that. Anyone can make a big round mass, okay? We're a bunch of, you know, generic kind of Gumby people. You know, anyone can do that. But what we're trying to do here is work generally, but also prepare to work very specifically. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start by adding some of this abdominal area, okay, because it creates such a dramatic profile, okay? So once again, this rib cage and then this, you know, movement out. So her pelvic point is actually right here. So you want to be sure that you add enough flesh here so that you get the sensation that her internal organs are being extended out. Okay. And then when I put down this clay, I am thinking about actual anatomy. So here we're going to be putting down the abdominal muscles here, okay? And let me see if I can get another image for you. Okay, let's see. Actually, we'll go right here. So we've got our anatomical sculpture here. this is like so beautiful and high tech. But here we've got our abdominal muscles. Okay, and you'll see that there are 2 rows of them. So you don't want to put a snake of clay that goes right in the middle, because that makes no sense, right? The part where you're going to see the outermost profile is going to be either this side or that side, most likely, because one side of her body will have the abdominals contracted and the other side will have them pulled and relaxed, okay, because she has this this very strong contractile, okay. So you can see here, all right, that here it's tighter. You can tell because there's more shadow there. Here, this is where the flesh is falling. Okay, you can tell because of the highlight. So this is probably the place where you're going to actually be seeing the profile, okay, from the side. Does that make sense? So this is the outermost point right here. You can see the light falling down on it. Okay, so when I sculpt this, okay, you see how my mass is actually on the left, right? Now I'm going to make sure that it's on the right-hand side, because this is the one, this is the side that we just saw in the photo that is most extended out. Okay, and because our models are not nude for this practice piece, you can go ahead and make the bathing suit part. Okay, so, and then afterwards you can color it and paint it as you like. Okay, all right. So once again, this is all inside the body. Okay, this rib cage, and we're really just now we're thinking about what's going on from the inside, and then the surface muscles covering that. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna look again. Okay. Want to be sure that that tipping is dramatic enough. I actually think it's not. So I'm going to keep putting more material here. All right, and then also moving back and forth, looking from the front. Okay, and then also looking from the side. Okay, so it's got to work. It's got to work front and back. I mean, front and sideways. The whole thing has got to eventually all snap together to be one sculpture. Okay, so that's the difference between two-dimensional work and 3D, is that with three-dimensional, you literally have to create every viewpoint. Now, in drawing and painting and you know, any other kind of two-dimensional artwork, you're going to be thinking about how all those literal forms are all converging to create the lights and the shadows, right? But you can actually, you don't necessarily have to literally create it all. So, so this whole practice of moving back and forth from front to back to side is going to be a major skill. So I want to move this part out too, okay? So I'm looking at I'm looking at this viewpoint. Okay, oh, actually, even better, look at this. Okay, so remember how I told you from the highlight, you can see that this part is extending the most. Look at that, even from above, you can see it's extending out the most. But now here, this is going to be the outermost point. So it's at a diagonal, okay? So to stay true to that, this here. I'm going to make sure that this part, this lower part, is going to be sticking out more. Okay, and this is just how you get things to correlate. This is why you really have to have a good setup in the beginning, so that if you've got papers all over a table, rifling through them, it takes so much energy to just find those, okay? And it gets frustrating. But if you have everything really well set up so that you can see everything very clearly, you can literally go, look, turn your head here, then turn your head there, turn your head here, turn your head there, and really just get a really much faster understanding of how things are working. Okay. All right. Oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so that's the abdominal area. I'm going to start adding a little bit more, and you see when I add, it's going to go underneath this surface. Right now, I'm just going to try to find the actual outlines, right? Okay, but at the same time, I want to keep building some of the masses so that this feels more and more like a full figure, but it's always going to be underneath the outer part. We're going to be searching for just these outer areas that create the profile, but and then the parts that let's say are filler, we're going to be sure that we're underneath, let's say the surface of the skin. Okay. All right. So now let's get some of this pelvis, because this is where we really get to see Mia's body type. Okay, so we're going to start to add clay, which will actually act as her iliac crest. Okay, the iliac crest is that kind of circular, semicircular part of the pelvis, and it extends out beyond the pelvic points that we have here. Okay. Now, when you're doing this part, it actually is a good idea to put some toothpicks here so that you don't get lost, okay? Now, I always find that when students start getting all excited about actually being able to put clay on, they start to really they start making like big presumptions about what the form is looking like. Okay, and you know what? I'm going to turn on some light here because I'm thinking that this sculpture looks a bit dark. How's that? Hope that helps. Okay, so yeah, so now I'm going to add some of this iliac crest, and then here I'm going to show you right on the skeleton what I'm talking about. Okay, so you see here, that's the iliac crest. Okay, so it's this right here. So you see how the pelvic points are inside, right? They're smaller, they're creating that smaller rectangular box that I made, you know, on the sculpture. So our rectangular box is within the confines of this. These are the points, the outermost points of those rectangular box. But then you see that the iliac crest extends beyond that, okay? So that's what I'm doing right now. I just want to arrange this light a little bit better so that I'm not blocking myself. Okay. All right. So move this out just a touch more. Okay, now I want to show you an illustration. And this helps you to understand a little bit better too what this pelvic area looks like. So this is a female pelvis, and you see how much wider and larger it is compared to a male. Okay, so we're creating this part here. You see here's male, which is taller, all right, more like a tall triangle. Okay, that's announced male at birth, right? And then this is announced female at birth. Okay, wider, much wider. So so when you are making this area, you're thinking that the spine is way back here, and then here are all the internal organs, okay? And then right here, that's the pubic bone, right? Okay, so let's keep going. So I hope this is making a little more sense. Okay, so I'm gonna give some form to this shape because it does get a bit janky and big, right? So we're just putting a little bit here, okay? I just want to double check that it's actually wide enough. I think it is, okay? So this is the other thing that I haven't talked about, which is that those that are have more like estrogen based bodies, right? There's going to be fat pads that develop in various parts of the body, and that's going to be on the sides here, covering this iliac crest, this semicircular ridge here. Okay, so when we look at Mia, when we look at our model, you're going to be seeing this. You see this compression right here? That is the fat pad that's on the side that's covering the iliac crest, okay? And it's being compressed a little bit by that bathing suit, okay? So you just have to remember that we're thinking almost as if we have X-ray eyes. We're thinking in layers, that there's layers of, first there's the skeleton, right? Which is the rigid structure upon which everything is resting upon. And then we have the muscles, right? And then over that, a layer of fat, and then a layer of skin. And the layer of fat is actually, it's going to have various thicknesses depending on the different parts of the body. And in particular, with those announced female at birth, and also those with more estrogen in their bodies, right? They're going to have fat pads over this flank area here, okay? There's going to be the breasts. You're going to find more of a fat pad here around the neck region, and then also the knees in particular, and then also the thighs. So, so those are things to consider. All right, so now I'm going to really try to get more of this hip area here. Now, when I place this clay on here, I'm actually placing it at a diagonal. So I want to show you. This is something that you know from, here we go. Can we see here? Yeah, all right. Oh, hello. Okay, so you see how this is at an angle, okay? So same thing. You're going to be looking at, all right. So you see how this outline, right? You see how this is the outermost point, okay? So we need to be sure that it's over there, okay? You can also see with this photo as well, that the fat pad here is compressing, right? It's compressing and it's pushing out over here. If you look here on this viewpoint, you're going to see that the fat pad, it's actually kind of like extended here to the side, right? And then it actually comes back here. Okay, so I know that that's not totally obvious. Here you can actually see it a little bit better. So fat pad out here. All right, so this is actually all fat pad right here. All right, that's the way we estrogen rich folks are like. Okay, so here you're gonna see the outermost point. Okay, I'm saying like if you were to look from the front, this is gonna be the outline. From here, then it's gonna travel here and then back here. And you can tell by the highlights. Okay, so I'm gonna move it back. So I'm gonna start to put more of this here. Now, another thing to consider too is that we need to get the suggestion of the fact that the knee is oriented at a diagonal. So the knee is actually this way. Okay, so you remember that at this hip socket right here, that there's a ball and socket joint. Okay, so here you can see that this ball and socket joint can rotate a lot. Let's see if you can see the knee. So it can rotate, so it can rotate this way, right, inwards, knock-kneed, or it can rotate out this way, okay? And that's what Mia is doing, our model, okay? She's rotating her knee out this way, okay? So it's like this is the front pelvis, and then the knee is rotating out, okay? So you see there's a full variety of movement that can happen, and it's because of this ball and socket joint. So once again, knowing how your joints are structured and their capacity to move will help you be able to invent your own sculptures, your own poses. But if you don't know, then it can become a problem, because then you start making stuff up that is not necessarily based on physical reality. And when it's all fake, you know, sometimes, a lot of times people, they can tell. And then at the very worst, when they can't tell, then they just get fooled by anything, and then anything seems to be okay. Which can also, which can make a person disassociate from reality. So it's important to have certain things that still tie back into this physical reality. I find that it's very important to be able to discern between what is abiding by certain laws of physics and what are not. So especially for those who want to do sci-fi and fantasy, if you know what makes a figure look very convincing, you know, gravity based, right? Then you can really start to bend reality. You can say, oh, you know what, this is going to be out in outer space. I want this to have no gravity. And then you can start to think about what happens then. But if you don't understand the cause and effect of the rules of physics as we know them for now, then it can be really hard to understand the structure of cause and effect. It's really just about cause and effect. But, you know, in the end, physics, all that stuff, I'm sure it's all going to change too. You know, as we become more and more curious and learn more and more, we can keep expanding on even physics. Okay, so I have added more of the base here, and so that I can start to put the feet in and also get a sense for the orientation of all of these parts. Okay, I've also angled this sculpture, so you see how it's tipping forward, so that it emulates me looking from above and also emulates this photo right here. Okay, so there's something that I just want to repeat in case you guys haven't remembered, which is that whenever you look at your sculpture or you look at a reference photo, right, you have to be sure that when you're looking, okay, your eyes are level and also your face is parallel to the surface that you're looking at. That way you don't get any distortions, right? So when you look at the reference photo, you got to be sure it's flat up against your face, like parallel to your eyes, okay? When you're looking like this, you don't want to be looking like that way from above or from below. You want to be sure that if you're looking in a certain area, your eye level is right smack in the middle of that area, so you get the least amount of visual distortion. So I don't mean like that, because then you get the bubble eye, but you got to have it back a little bit, right? And then here, right? So when I'm looking from above at the sculpture, I have to be sure that I'm angled in such a way that that I really, really am looking at the exact same perspective that is being portrayed in the photo. Does that make sense? So let's say it's a more extreme angle. All right, so it's going to be like this. Okay. So from the side view, this is what it looks like. This is how I will be looking at the sculpture. So let's pull it back a bit. So you see here, when I look at the photo, okay, first of all, it's too low, okay? So I'm going to actually bring this up so that it's level with my eyes. Okay, now sometimes this is annoying, but you know what? If you get it right the first time, you don't have to go back and redo it again. So we're just trying to make sure that everything here is nice and consistent so that you don't have to redo anything. Okay, so here, I'm going to look at it. So this is my eye level, right? So I'm going to look at it like this. Okay, I'm looking at it like this. Make sure that when you're putting the photo up, you're making sure that it's all level, okay? Because if you got it askew, it's gonna mess up your perception. Remember that? So this is all about perspective, and if you can get the perspective right, you won't have to end up having to redo work, okay? So right now, let me get this angle, this light. Okay. So right now, I'm gonna be, let me back this up somewhere. Yeah, better. Okay. So I'm looking at my photo, all right? And then when I'm looking down at my sculpture, I'm trying to make sure that the actual perspective I see here is the exact angle that I'm looking down at the sculpture. That is how you make sure that these askew, you know, bird's eye view photos are actually being used properly as reference material. If you get kind of, you know, forgetful about these things, what can happen is that you can actually put your information down in the wrong spot and not even realize it. And the worst part is when you have to like redo stuff. Okay, so we're trying to avoid that. So I'm looking at her from above here, and then I'm looking down. And then it's from this angle that I can start to put in the angle of the feet. And I put a little snake of clay here. That's going to act as my big toe. And you can draw a line here too to show where the division for the big toe is. So I'm going to do this one first. So you can see from far away, and then I'm going to do it from close up. And what you're going to see is that I'm making a pyramidal type shape. So here, so there's going to be the point of a pyramid kind of shape, a sloping pyramid. That's going to go down and move into the shape of the big toe. All right, so from the side, that's how it looks. Okay, and we're just blocking stuff in here too. So, so you don't have to worry about being too absolutely precise, but you do want to try to put it in as well as you can. Then I'm going to start putting in the toes. Okay, and once again, this is just still the block in. Just trying to get a sense for how things are arranged. So I'm not spending a ton of time, you know, making these baby cute little toes and all that stuff. I'm really just throwing the clay in there so that I can get a gauge for proportion and positioning. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to see, and I see that the heel moves in more here. So this is all from above. So I'm going to draw a line here, so you can see. And then you actually can draw in the outline of the foot itself. So let me show you now what this all looks like. Okay, you can see right here. All right, so this is the upper pyramidal shape. Oops. Okay, so you see that that upper shape is here and then it moves out. Okay, and if you were to feel on your own foot, you would feel that this shape here is the uppermost part. Okay, so that's the tarsal bone. Okay, tarsal here, and then here you got a whole bunch of small bones. Okay, all right, and you see how I drew the outline. Okay, so we're making sure that this is lower. So I'm going to keep sculpting a bit more. I'm going to rotate this a bit so that you can see from above what I did or what I'm doing. Okay. Now, when I look at the feet, okay, once again, I want to get this toe. Okay. Now, for those of you, you may want to draw first. Just do this first. Okay, and sometimes that actually is a lot easier because then you can kind of look and redraw and redraw. Some people, when they put down clay, they start to get all obsessed with it. So sometimes it's better to just, you know, obsess with it and, you know, trying to get it all perfect. And then in the end, they didn't even put it in the right spot. So you might actually want to draw it first. Okay, and I'm just laying out this area here, and once again, remember that it's going to be higher up here. Okay, and then there's also the heel too. Okay, so if you look at this photo, you see that? You see this kind of like T shape. Notice how it's like a T, but slightly angled. This part of the foot is actually slightly angled a little bit more. Okay, so when you look from above, you're gonna be looking for that, okay? And making sure that the alignment from the front chest, right? You're gonna be checking for the rotations here at the pelvis and the rib cage, right? And also the head, and then also where the knees are pointing, okay? And then this in relationship. So you're trying to get them all to work, okay? I suggest you just go for the major masses, then compare the alignment of the major masses to the lower regions or the upper regions. Always start from here. Like these points right here are very concrete. So from there you can start to think in relationship, where is all that? So you use your plumb line for that, remember? Okay, you can do things like this. All right, and then that way you can get that alignment. Okay. So I'm gonna fast forward a bit, work a little bit, and then you can see more. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit more here. There's a little bone right here on the side. Okay. It's the head of one of the tarsal bones, right? So that's a reference point. So it's going to be right around here. Okay, and it defines the outer, this spot where there's an angle change, where it moves from the tarsals to this ankle area. Okay. So you can see that I put some of the ankle there. I'm just trying to get a general feel for where this is all placed. So you see how, if you were to look at the foot from the side, I'm trying to figure out from the front to the back, at what point does this actually exist? So you literally could divide this section into two parts and compare the proportions on either side. Okay, so that's a really easy way to get the proportions of pretty much anything. You just need two boundary points and then a midpoint. So you're looking at three points in space and comparing them. And typically that'll get you proportions, okay? Now, the thing with small proportions is that they have to work with the large proportions, the proportions that you see throughout the entire body, meaning you start with the height, you start with the outermost width of the body, and then from there, you compare these smaller parts to those larger proportions, okay? So it's always from big to small. Now, I want to, let me rotate this again for you. Actually, you know what? Let's keep going with this. So I'm going to tilt this back down so that you can see it more like this. I'm going to change this angle. And now we're going to look at a little bit at this area right here. Okay, so right now I've got the arm in a certain spot, but we need to find out where the elbow is, right? So you see how I put a little elbow right there? So I'm not sure if that's completely right, but I just want to start placing everything and thinking about where they go, where these parts go. So you can see in this photo here that there's this line right here, and that's the fold that's happening right where the head of the ulna is, okay? So, I mean, formally it's called the olecranon, but you don't even really need to know that. You just need to know that the elbow, okay, is the bone that is closest to the pinky side of your hand. So it's that bone. All right, that's the elbow. Okay. All right, so I want to turn this. I haven't really worked from the back yet. So Let me just change this around and okay, so I just drew in this tilting of the pelvis so that you really get a really strong gesture, okay? And then now I'm gonna start to lay in some of this flesh back here, okay? So you can see in the reference photo that there's a highlight here. Very dim, but you can see that it's there. So that is where you're gonna be finding the this outermost point of that back thigh, which is what will also be creating the profile from the side, right? So this is the outermost point. When it's like this, you're gonna know that this is what's gonna create the side profile. So I'm just gonna stick some clay here, remembering that we're not doing everything, right? We're not putting all the masses in yet, but trying to get an idea for where the outermost points are. Okay, so that once you created these outermost points, then from there, you can start to investigate what the shape is like, the transition from this to that, to the other profile from this side. Okay, is this making sense? It's like, well, you'll see. Okay, so I'm going to just rotate this so I can see this a little better. Now, when it comes to knowing where your pelvic points are, it's very important because then you can drop a plumb line and see where the portions of the leg are aligning underneath that. Okay. So I'm just placing the clay here. And once again, I'm looking at things like, let's see, like this area right here. So you can see the highlight here, right? And then it's brightest here, okay? Then it's brightest there. So you have to pay very close attention to where the highlights travel. So they're traveling here, then they're traveling here. All right, so I'm gonna put that down. And another thing is that you really have to feel your actual back of your knee. That's what's really gonna help you understand what's going on. You know, some of you may be like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but you've got to try because this is really, by actually feeling the shape of the volume of, let's say, the back of the calf, you're going to be, when you feel that, you're going to make a connection. Okay, now one of the biggest issues with sculpture is that a lot of times people are looking at it as if it's a flat image, but really it's all about volumes. And if you can actually feel and start to develop a type of memory that can pinpoint the changes in form and be able to translate that into your sculpture, I'm telling you, it's the new way of sculpture, I think. Because right now we have such a digital, you know, kind of two-dimensional, and everything's on a flat screen way of seeing things. And what's happening is that, you know, people are getting stunted, okay, from not having enough experience of the 3 dimensions, okay? It's very important to develop this part of yourself. So it's really a good opportunity. Okay, so we're gonna have the gastrocnemius muscle. I just want to show this to you guys. Gastrocnemius muscle is this right here. Okay, so there are 2 lobes. And if you feel the back of your calf, you're gonna feel right here, this is where it's fullest. Oh gosh, you didn't even see that. Sorry. So this is the gastrocnemius muscle, the two lobes of the gastrocnemius muscle. All right. And then there's the tendon that extends down here to, which is like the Achilles tendon, okay? Extends down, down here to the heel, okay? So when you feel this area right here, you're gonna feel that that is the thickest area of your calf, okay? And it's always gonna be, it's gonna be like at an angle. So this, it's gonna angle like this. The fullness is gonna be down here, then it's gonna be up here. And you're gonna feel the greatest fullness in this area. Okay, so we need to get that for this sculpture. Okay, let's move it over. Okay, all right. Okay, so I actually just felt my own calf, and I'm feeling that this part is actually coming in here, and it's actually here. Please excuse me. It's actually down here you're gonna feel the fullest part. So we gotta, okay. All right, so here we go. We're going to move this clay here. Now you see that this is the outermost point, so I'm going to just place a little piece of clay there. Okay, so that this is always the outermost point. And then for areas like this, you can just fill in a little bit. All right, notice how I'm not totally, you know, covering a big old blob there. All right, I'm not doing that. Okay, and then now I'm gonna put some flesh here. So there's this area right here. They're the glutes, okay? The gluteus muscles. So they're arranged in this direction, like this. Okay, like that. So, so I'm just gonna let this flesh hang here. Okay, because this is the underside of the pelvic area, we want to make sure that it feels like gravity is affecting that form, and it's going to drop, right? The weight of it is going to fall, is going to be falling down. Well, dropping down, okay. And that will give this body a real sense of weight. All right, so I hope this gives you a sense of how and where to look for things. You really have to use your, you know, once you've got, as you're getting these, the front, side, and back views in, you really have to be looking from above and below. And I have all those photos furnished for you. So really, it's just a matter of being sure that you're looking at everything from the same perspective, and then getting it all to work. Okay, so this, yeah, so when you put down this arm, right, the outermost point is going to be here, right, and then it's going to be here. It's going to be around here, closer to the back of the arm than it is the front. All right, and if you're not really sure what I mean, you just put your hand like that, You put her like that and you'll feel that the outermost widest point of the arm is actually going to be closer to the back. You know, maybe 2/3 of the back. Okay, so I think this is good enough for the beginning. I will continue on with more of this sculpture. This is just your preliminary start. Okay. All right. That's it.